So if you happen to follow the channel, then you'll know that I absolutely love my iPad Pro. But I also always mention that the iPad Pro wouldn't really be the iPad Pro without this $350 accessory called the Magic Keyboard. Now this thing released, I think about a year after the new redesign of the iPad Pro came out, and it was supposed to come out with iPadOS 13.4 cursor support, and it's the first time that we got a sense of the iPad really turning into an actual computer, because we got trackpad support, we have this new kind of built-in hinge mechanism, it made it unique, and this Magic Keyboard is absolutely amazing, and it's still the #1 accessory that I recommend to people when they're like, hey, what should I get for my iPad Pro? I just got it. If you have an iPad Pro, this accessory is going to make your iPad Pro a completely different product. But again, it's $350 for this accessory. It is by far the most expensive accessory that I've ever bought for any product, no, let alone a freaking tablet. So what I want to talk about today is a Magic Keyboard accessory that looks pretty much identical to this Magic Keyboard, is a quarter of the price, and adds a bunch of extra features that Apple omitted. Function keys, function row. And we're going to talk about if that price to performance ratio is really going to be good enough to let you forego the $350 Apple accessory and go with a third-party accessory like the one I'm going to show you today. So we're going to be going over exactly how it works, what it can do, what it's lacking, and how close we get to that Magic Keyboard functionality at a quarter of the price. Let's talk about it. So as I show you guys some B-roll of what this OfficeLab's Magic Keyboard alternative kind of looks like in terms of a visual standpoint, take some guesses down below in the comments as to how much this thing actually costs, because I'm going to be revealing the actual cost, or you can just skip ahead, or you can just click on the link in the description if you guys do want to see how much this thing is actually worth, because for the price, this thing gets very, very close to getting to that Magic Keyboard level, and you're not upset about some of the downfalls because you're saving so much money with this Magic Keyboard alternative, and it looks identical to the Magic Keyboard. It has that same sort of hinged floating design mechanism that we've all grown to love with the Magic Keyboard, and it's what makes that Magic Keyboard and iPad Pro kind of accessory meld together so well because it's so unique and so pretty to look at. And this keyboard does the same exact thing from a look standpoint. From a build quality standpoint, it's actually a little bit heavier in my opinion. It is heavier than the original Magic Keyboard, and that's because it has some extra internals in there, which we're going to talk about in a second. But in terms of what it's built and what it's made out of, I want to say it's made out of the same material, kind of like that soft touch rubbery feel. It feels the same, but it feels a little bit different. Maybe it's the quality, I don't know what it is, but if I were to feel them side by side, I could only describe them as a soft touch rubbery material that both of them have, but they still feel a little bit different. Not in a good way or in a bad way, just feels a little bit different, maybe a little bit more slippery in the hand, if anything. And then you guys can see that it still has that camera cutout for the iPad Pro, so this will work with an iPad Pro 2018 and higher for the 12.9 inch, and they also have an 11 inch version, so I'll link both of those down below if you guys do want to check them out. So it has a camera cutout for both of them. It attaches the same exact way as you do with the Magic Keyboard. It is a magnetic backplate for the iPad Pro, so it just magnetizes onto the actual keyboard itself. And that's where you're going to notice the first difference. On the backplate on the Magic Keyboard, you have the pin connectors. And the pin connectors is what actually powers the Magic Keyboard itself. It's what allows you to use the trackpad and the keyboard, versus with this guy, it's actually a Bluetooth connectivity one, right? So it doesn't use 3 pin connectors. It still uses that magnetic backplate to attach it itself and to hold it in place, and it's a very strong magnet. No issues with the magnet whatsoever. But just so you know, it doesn't connect via the 3 pin connectors. It connects via Bluetooth, which the only other company that allows you to use the 3 pin connectors as of right now is Logitech, and that's because they have a partnership with Apple, so I'm sure Logitech pays Apple a lot of money to license that technology, and either the third-party companies don't want to pay that, or Apple just doesn't let them do it, and they only really trust Logitech with that technology. That is how you actually physically and virtually connect the iPad, so Bluetooth to actually get it running, and then you physically just magnetize it right onto the back plate of this Magic Keyboard alternative. And that's a great segue into telling you guys why this is kind of a little bit heavier, right? There's 2 reasons why this is going to be heavier. A, it's because it has a battery. The Magic Keyboard from Apple does not have a battery in it because it doesn't have its own battery or doesn't have its own power source. It doesn't work as a Bluetooth keyboard. The only way the Magic Keyboard works is if you actually have an iPad attached to it. Versus with this one, it can actually work with any Bluetooth device if you really wanted it to work that way. It probably wouldn't be the best idea because of this backplate and this thing is kind of in the way. Let's say you're in a situation where you want to use a physical keyboard with an iPhone or with like a Mac Mini or something, you technically can connect this to anything that has a Bluetooth connectivity. But again, that is what adds the weight. And then also a set of function row keys, everybody. So one of the biggest gripes with the Magic Keyboard was that Apple actually decided not to put a function row key. So no play pause buttons, no brightness buttons, no keyboard shortcuts, no go back home, no search functionality. So Apple just omitted the function row keys totally. And they said it's because they didn't have enough space and it wouldn't fit well. But clearly they have enough space because this company, For again, 1/4 of the price, or roughly that, they were able to add a function row key and a full-size function row key. So with the function row key, you have a bunch of different things. So you have the go home button, you have a search or spotlight button, you have the brightness up and down for the actual iPad, you have a screenshot button, which I love to have, so now we have like a million different ways to take a screenshot on an iPad. You have the lock button, which locks the actual iPad. You have your play, forward, and back buttons for media controls. You have your volume up and down and volume mute buttons. And then you have your delete and Bluetooth buttons. So that is what that entire function row is for. And they work extremely well. You don't have to remap them. You don't have to do anything to them. The second you Bluetooth connect this keyboard to the iPad Pro, it controls your brightness. You can go home with it. So it's just a much easier way to interact. Like, I really wish Apple added a function row. Even if they would have been half size or a third size of the actual keycaps themselves, I would have been down with that, just to have some extra functionality. So then let's segue into the keyboard itself. So the keyboard is a little bit different. It is still very comfortable, very, very clicky. And it's honestly relatively quiet. I'm a big fan of quiet keyboards. I know right now we're in a certain wave where like the louder your mechanical keyboard is, I don't know, the cooler you are. I'm not really on that train, but with this one, for me, it's like the quieter the better. And there's a nice little thud to it, and I would say it even has a tiny bit more key travel than the Magic Keyboard. Don't get me wrong, the Magic Keyboard is a absolutely amazing typing experience as well, but this one, it is a little bit different, and it does have little divots or like finger, like concavity, I guess you would call it, to be able to rest your fingers in there, versus the Apple Magic Keyboard doesn't have that. They're just flat keys, versus this one actually caves in a little bit to form around your finger a little bit better. To each their own, some people like it, some people don't. I just wanted to point that out to you. And then one more thing with the keyboard itself is that yes, it has a backlight just like the Magic Keyboard from Apple, but this one actually has RGB lights. Not that I'm always changing the different colors of the backlit keyboard, but it's nice to have. So you can go with like red, purple, blue, green, and then the normal like white color in the background. So having RGB lights as just like a built-in feature, always a welcome addition because it adds a little personality to the keyboard itself. So this keyboard is going to work just like any other Bluetooth keyboard. It's going to work like any other Magic Keyboard, and it works extremely well. I haven't had any connectivity issues. I haven't had any mishaps of having to double press keys or maybe pressing one key and getting 2 or 3 letters, which I know has happened in the past with some of these other third-party Bluetooth keyboards. But from a Bluetooth keyboard standpoint, this thing is great. I've had no issues with it. It works as advertised. And again, guys, it's just a keyboard to use with your iPad Pro. So now let's get to the point, or maybe the second point that everybody wants to find out. One is probably the price, but the second thing is going to be the trackpad experience, right? Because I know a lot of companies have tried to put a trackpad and use it with the iPad Pro, and it just doesn't work nearly as well as what Apple does, right? The best experience when it comes to a trackpad on the iPad Pro, there's 3 options, right? There's a Magic Keyboard from Apple, there's the standalone trackpad that you can get from Apple that works with all of their devices, and then there's Logitech. Logitech, again, licensed their software, or licensed their hardware and software, and they were able to use the pin connectors to give you that straight experience the way Apple wanted the trackpad to be used. Other companies, and like well-known companies like Bridge, for instance, they have a great hardware product, you know, kind of expensive, but great product overall, but even them, they aren't able to get that perfect trackpad experience. Now, I do want to let you guys know that this is, even though it is a decent trackpad experience, and it's better than a lot of the ones that I've tested in the past, like all your gestures work, right? You can single tap without physically clicking on the trackpad itself and still get that. So you have tap to click, you also have the regular click action. All your gestures work, so 2-finger gestures, 3-finger gestures, 4-finger gestures. It's just sometimes, especially once you start doing the gestures, it's a little bit wonky, right? Like a little bit. But again, I've seen much, much worse. And I'm telling you, when I've seen worse, I've seen so much worse when it comes to trackpad support from a Bluetooth connected device on the iPad Pro. It just wasn't really meant to work that way, but I was able to give you, I would say, like an 80 to 85% experience all the way compared to the regular Magic Keyboard. But again, keep in mind, this is a much cheaper device. This is a third-party device. It's connected via Bluetooth as opposed to the 3-pin connectors. And again, you're not going to be spending $350 on this thing. And for those people that don't even want to use a trackpad but like this form factor, there's actually a shortcut on the keyboard itself to actually kill the trackpad connectivity. So if you want to rest your palms on there and just use this as a Magic Keyboard and use your finger to navigate the actual iPad but still use the keyboard itself, then by all means, go for it. It works extremely well, so you avoid all accidental touches on the trackpad itself. But the trackpad works decently well, like I mentioned, gets you about 80 to 85% of the way there. Another difference is that yes, it's made out of plastic instead of glass. And one of the best selling points about the Magic Keyboard on Apple's side is that it's not a dive board trackpad design. You can physically click anywhere on the trackpad and it's going to respond to you. Versus this one, this is more of a dive board design, so the bottom 2/3 is where you're going to interact mostly on the actual trackpad. But again, if you use tap to click, then you can kind of tap anywhere on the actual trackpad and it's going to be responsive. So overall, I think from a third-party package, right, from a third-party manufacturer, this thing is great. And drumroll please, for a price, for the 11-inch, you're going to be spending $85 compared to $300, and I believe the 12.9-inch is $105, right? Like, think about it that way, price to performance ratio. So you're going to be going from $350 to basically $100 for something that's going to give you like 90 to 95% functionality over the Magic Keyboard from Apple. Because from a magnetic standpoint, works great. From a Bluetooth standpoint, works great. From a keyboard standpoint, amazing. Build quality, I love it. Built-in battery, also great. But then when it comes to the actual trackpad itself, again, it's not going to be a perfect one-to-one. I want to lower people's expectations, so when they do get it, they're actually very happy with what they receive. I'm not going to sit here and tell you like this experience is going to be identical to what you get with the Magic Keyboard. But again, that's probably why you're spending another $250, because Apple knows that they've monopolized the way that it works with the iPad Pro, and that you only really have two options. And then again, even on the Logitech side, they only make that trackpad keyboard combo for the 11-inch iPad Pro and the 10.9-inch iPad Air, versus the 12.9-inch, the only options you have are the Magic Keyboard or to get a stand and get the standalone Magic Trackpad directly from Apple. But even the trackpad I think is like $150. Like, the trackpad is expensive. And then some final tidbits on the actual product itself. So the actual hinge mechanism, it does work the same way, but it isn't as, I guess towards the very end of it, the way I would describe it, it's not as tight. So it stays where you want it to stay, but you really have to like push it that all the way to the end to make sure that you're getting the angle that you want. But from a viewing angle standpoint, it's exactly the same as the Magic Keyboard. It does charge via USB-C on the right-hand side. Like I mentioned earlier, it's an 850 milliamp hour battery, so it's not huge, but again, it's a Bluetooth keyboard, so you don't need much battery. Like, I've been using this for 4 days straight, and I didn't even charge it out of the box, and it still has the green little icon right there. And then two more things to take into account when it comes to charging. You can actually take a USB-C to USB-C cable and plug your iPad into the keyboard itself if the keyboard is running low, so the keyboard will use power from the iPad to actually charge it up. And then also, you don't have an extra USB-C port on this little like hinge right here, which you do have on the Magic Keyboard from Apple. But again, that one is purely for power pass and no data transfer. So you still have obviously your USB-C/Thunderbolt port on your M1 iPad Pro or any iPad Pro that comes directly on it. But overall, the package that OfficeLab has given us, I'm a big fan of it, especially for the price. Because whenever people ask me, hey, should I get a MacBook Air or should I get an iPad Pro? Most of the time I tell them to go with the MacBook Air just from a cost standpoint, because the moment you get a brand new 12.9-inch iPad Pro baseline model, $1,100. Then you gotta spend $350 on a Magic Keyboard. Now you're at $1,450 and you only have 128 gigs of storage and 8 gigs of RAM. So most of the time I tell people, hey, just go to the MacBook Air. It's gonna be more familiar. It's a much better cost to performance ratio. The iPad Pro is for people like me that just love the iPad Pro so much that they're willing to spend a little bit more for all that versatility and like the cool factor of an iPad Pro. But now when you have third-party companies making products like this, you can go out and get yourself a refurbished iPad Pro, you know, save yourself $300 there. Now instead of spending $350, you're spending $100. Get yourself an Apple Pencil alternative like the Lenovo pens that we've talked about in the past for $30, $40. And now you're cooking with fire. Now you have an iPad Pro set up for around $700 instead of $1,400. So all things to consider when you're trying to think of iPad Pro accessories. Keep all these things in mind. But overall, shout out OfficeLab for sending this over. Big fan of it. If you guys do want to check it out, like I said, it's going to be anywhere from $80 to $100. So link in the description down below if you guys do want to check it out. That's going to do it for this video. If you guys did enjoy, leave a little dolphin in the comments down below so I know that you guys made it. And also leave some comments down below of any other accessories that you guys use with the iPad Pro that kind of help you get your work done, whether it's at a desk, on the go, or are you like me where like you just buy all the Apple product accessories, or do you venture out and go to the third-party world and kind of test out different accessories for the iPad Pro? Oh, and then one last final thing, I am running iPadOS 16 Beta 2 right now, so maybe that has something to do with a little bit of jankiness, which I don't think is really getting in the way. I think it's going to be the same experience whether you're on the regular public release or iPadOS 16 Beta, but overall I just want to let you guys know that. But that's going to do it for this video. Click on one of these videos right here if you guys want to see some more on iPadOS 16 or some more iPad Pro accessories. But I'm out of here. Definitely check this thing out.